Hey, what media company, what news outlet do you think is the most important propaganda tool for the Liberal Party of Canada? If you answer quickly, I bet you'd say the CBC. And in many ways, you're right. They're larger than all other news companies in Canada combined in terms of staff and money. They often set the agenda for other reporters that copy them. But in terms of actual views, they don't command attention of Canadians like they used to in the pre-internet age, at least. There was some truth to the CBC, the idea that the CBC unified Canadians in that they gave a single political narrative to everyone, whether you liked it or not. And if you didn't like it, what were you going to do? That was before the internet, before talk radio was big. So each night in Canada, since there really weren't other options, about 1 million people did, in fact, tune in to the CBC's flagship news shows like The National with Knowlton Nash and then later Peter Mansbridge. I don't know if you remember those names. You have to be of a certain vintage. Can you even name the hosts now? Do they still even publish The National? When was the last time you watched it? Now, maybe you do. Maybe it's a hard habit for you to break, but their viewership is so low, I don't think they even publish it anymore. It used to be 1 million. Last I saw, it was about 250,000. Imagine that. Even though the country's population has never been bigger and their budget has never been bigger, no one watches CBC News, at least no one under 50 years old. I think the most powerful propaganda outlet for the Liberal government may be something different, and it's funded by the government, of course. It's called the Canadian Press. It's a newswire, which means it's a group of reporters who write stories and make those stories available to a variety of news companies to run those stories as if the stories were their own. It's like a Canadian version of Reuters or the Associated Press. Basically, if you start your own small newspaper or website and you don't have a budget to hire a reporter in Ottawa and in Montreal and in Vancouver and in Toronto and anywhere else, you can subscribe to the Canadian Press and they've got you covered. You could literally publish an entire newspaper just with their stuff, not hire a single person of your own. I'm not sure if there are companies that do that, but it would make sense to. There's certainly many companies that fill all the gaps of their own coverage with Canadian Press words and pictures, or CP as it's often known. Which is one reason you sometimes see the exact same story with the exact same headline in publications that are supposedly competing with each other. They have the same story, and that's the thing, isn't it? CP, Canadian Press stories, sneak their way into other publications and use whatever reputation those other publications have, like your local newspaper. They use your local newspaper's reputation to whitewash the fact that CP Wire copy is probably the most pro-liberal content in Canada. First of all, of course, they're heavily funded by the government. But of course, here's just a small list of special grants that they've received over the last few years from Trudeau. It just never stops. There are so many of them. And those are just special grants. There are a large number of government troughs that are like general grants that they feed from. Let me give you one example. Here's them getting more than $1 million for Indigenous reporting, which of course means a particular agenda, pumping up the Liberal government's claims of genocide in residential schools. So I put it to you that the Canadian Press is more dangerous than the CBC because it hides its identity in the identity of the newspaper that publishes it. You sometimes see those little letters CP or CP Wire, but most people don't look at that. Most people don't know what that means. It means it's a CP story sneaking into your local newspaper. Here's an example. Here's a story, and I'm actually quoting from the Canadian Press's own website here. The story is, U.S. State Department targets Online News Act in Human Rights Report. That's an interesting headline. Here's how it was phrased on Twitter by some CP subscribers. This is City News Toronto. The U.S. State Department is taking aim at Canada's Online News Act in a human rights report that criticizes press freedom in Canada, which experts characterized Thursday as Orwellian. Okay, I'm a little bit confused because of the grammar there. What's the Orwellian part? Is it the Online News Act or the U.S. Human Rights Report? Well, obviously it's the Online News Act and other censorship, but that's not how this story puts it. It's actually ambiguous, isn't it? It's a bit confusing. Let me read the story from the City website. You'll see what I mean immediately. about this having the identical headline written by Anna Karadilia, the Canadian Press. I'll just read it. The U.S. State Department is taking aim at Canada's Online News Act in a human rights report that criticizes press freedom in Canada, which experts characterize Thursday as Orwellian. Now, I'm thinking, oh, the Canadian censorship is what's Orwellian. No, 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 no. It's this. Welcome to opposite day. Let me read some more. The Online News Act, which requires Meta, that owns Facebook and Instagram, and Google, which owns YouTube, to compensate news publishers for the use of their content, is cited in a section of the report covering freedom of the press. That's quite some spin. In plain English, as you may know, the Canadian government has told Facebook and Google that they have to pay to link to news stories in Canada. If someone types in something in the search engine and Google says, okay, click here, they have to pay for the privilege of that. It's such a huge shakedown. It's contrary to the whole nature of the internet, which is clicking and sharing. You don't have to pay to link to someone. In fact, you're doing them a favor by sending them traffic. It's the reverse. News outlets pay Google, pay Facebook, because they want people to come to their sites. Anyways, Facebook saw this for what it is, a shakedown. They refused to pay. And so the only way to be compliant with the law is to not link to Canadian news stories on Facebook or Instagram, so they don't have to pay the shakedown, because otherwise they'd be breaking the law if they linked. So it's a form of censorship. Basically, the Canadian government says, pay us a huge amount of money or don't link to Canadian news stories, so they don't link. It's atrocious. It's awful for little companies. Okay, back to the story. Look at who the Canadian press says the enemy is here. The U.S. is determined to crush two important pieces of Canadian legislation, the Online News Act and the Online Streaming Act. Their endgame is clear, said Fen Hampson, an international affairs professor at Carleton University. Who is Fen Hampson? That's such an interesting name. I Googled him. He is the president of the World Refugee and Migration Council. That's a bit of a weird choice to quote about media bias. That's just really weird. Let me read more in the story. Hampson said large tech companies oppose both pieces of legislation. What we're seeing is not what I would call honest criticism. Fen knows if you're honest or not. It's a calculated campaign to protect big tech's profits, he said. I would say, to put it bluntly, the report takes tiny grains of truth and spins them into a full-blown web of deception and misinformation that is perhaps worthy of George Orwell himself. Oh my God! So the people opposing the regulation and the taxation of social media, they're like Big Brother. And wouldn't you know it, the Canadian press found another professor to say the exact same thing. What are the odds? Alfred Hermida, a professor at the University of British Columbia's Journalism School, also referred to the concept of doublethink from Orwell's famous political dystopian novel 1984. Hermida said the report takes things, quote, that are actually promoting press freedom, but presenting them in a way as if they're curtailing freedom. Got it. So opposing the regulation, censorship, and taxation of social media, that's 1984. But the government that's doing those things, that's actually, that I'm so confused. How is taxing and regulating the internet promoting freedom? This is so upside down. These professors are accusing the U.S. State Department of doing precisely what they're doing. I got whiplash here. Now, I thought this was interesting. Take a look at this. The State Department took issue with a stream of that initiative, talking about government funding, that prioritizes the hiring of diverse journalists, including those who are Indigenous, Black, have disabilities, who are part of the LGBTQ community. The report claims it discriminated against journalists who fell outside of these favored categories. So the U.S. State Department is saying by giving money based on race or sex is discriminating to other people, which is so obviously true. We have visible minorities working at Rebel News. I'm not going to list them or identify them to you. That would imply they're tokens. We have people of every background at Rebel News. We have not applied for special grants for Black reporters or Indigenous reporters. We just haven't. We could, I guess, and we'd receive hundreds of thousands of tax dollars if we did, but we didn't because we're not racist freaks. But look at the Canadian press's professor, an elderly white male. By the way, I got nothing against elderly white male. I think I'm sort of becoming one myself. Here's what he had to say. I'm talking about Professor Hermida. Hermida said media has, by and large, been very white and very male, and the effort to increase diversity is attempting to correct historical harms. Hermida added, it's really startling to see such a politicized report come out of the State Department. He described it as a MAGA lens on press freedom in Canada. Got it. Hey, have you ever seen a white male quitting his own job to give it to a woman of color? Or they just want other people to pay the price for their reverse racism. Did you know, by the way, that white males, by doing journalism, have created historical harm? I didn't know that, but then again, I'm not a student in Professor Hermida's class. I love that line, though, MAGA, press freedom. You know, it's designed to be scary, MAGA, but I sort of like a little bit of that MAGA freedom myself, you know, the First Amendment and all that. So, by the way, who wrote this story for the Canadian press that's being reprinted across the country? That doesn't actually quote anyone on the other side of the story. They just have two professors condemning freedom of speech. They found two professors to use the exact same identical language. That's quite a trick. I wonder who crafted such a news article. Why, it's Anya Caradelia, if I'm saying her name right. She's a journalist. But here she is participating in a propaganda session with Stephen Guilbeault, the Liberal Party cabinet minister who drafted these media censorship laws. This is through a Liberal Party think tank called Canada 2020. I thought that was weird at the time. I remember seeing it. Since when does a reporter work at a political party function as a propagandist participating with the cabinet minister and then go back to journalism the next day reporting on those same Liberal journalists? You see my point? See, when the CBC comes to lie to you, when the CBC tells you that censorship is freedom and freedom is censorship, when the CBC uses the word MAGA to scare you, at least you know they're government journalists, so you know not to trust them. But when the Canadian press does the same thing under 100 different names, being those subscribing newspapers across the country, it's sneakier, isn't it? Anya Caradelia has always been running errands for the Liberal Party, whether it's at a Liberal Party conference like Canada 2020 or now at the Liberal Party's funded CP News. Never, never, never trust them.